here today with David Yingling, a good friend of mine. David, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
David's helped me walk through a few different, moments of crisis that I've had in life as a therapist. But you're a counselor?
Yes, sir. I am.
All right. That's what, licensed professional counselor, LPC.
Yep.
Okay. How long you been doing it?
Well, I started my counseling journey back when I was about 20 years old. I was still in graduate school and took an internship in my master's program and was doing some stuff in the counseling and testing center at the university, helping people to guide their career paths and whatnot. So I started many years ago. I don't want to give away my age necessarily, but it's been a long time.
At least 10 years ago.
Oh yeah.
That's awesome. So I know you fairly well as a friend and as a person and as a counselor, but I don't really know about your upbringing.
Sure.
And where you grew up or anything like that. So
Yeah.
let's start there.
Sure. Well, I was born in Australia. For real?
Really?
Yeah. My parents moved to Australia a few months after they were married, and I was born there back in the 70s. They were incentivizing Americans to go move to Australia for their economy and whatnot. So lived there for about 2 years, came back, don't have any recollection of it, but was raised in a town called Boulder, Colorado. And my folks divorced when I was 8, and I lived with my grandparents for a couple of years. And then my mom remarried, I guess I was about 10 years old. And just an amazing man came into my life and really took the role of father and a good husband to my mom, and just a wonderful man I'm very close to and thankful for his place in our life, for sure. And so a lot of stability was brought into my world at about age 10, but she's diagnosed ADD by the age of 4 and on medications and assessed for potential learning disabilities and all that stuff. Come to find out I didn't have any, but I was pretty smart, but just kind of a behavioral basket case, didn't listen well, didn't follow directions, couldn't sit still, interrupted people, constantly touching things and breaking things, just the typical ADD problem kid. With a divorce, I was probably trending to be a force to be reckoned with for some negative things, maybe a life of drugs and alcohol or crime or just bad decisions probably. So the first great thing that happened was my dad. I call him my dad. Came into my world at age 10 and brought a whole lot of stability in my life. So made it through middle school and high school, graduated with average grades without much effort. And back then it's like, you need to go to college. And I'm like, why? Because you need to go to college. Okay, I didn't know what I wanted to do, right? So I just kind of bumbled off to a university where my friend was going, and didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. Had an idea of maybe doing Air Force ROTC or something, but decided I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to cut my hair and didn't want to do the physical training. So maybe missed an opportunity there, but just kind of getting acclimated to school, first semester on, didn't take a lot of classes and whatnot, but eventually found my niche, what I thought was going to be my niche. I wanted to do broadcasting. So I was involved with campus radio and campus television.
Yeah, the voice for it. Yeah, for sure.
And was actually aspiring to be like a Tom Brokaw or James Spann would be, something like that.
Yeah.
What I want to do. So yeah, my roots are in Colorado, and that's where I started.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
At Australia. I never knew that. Never,
Mhm.
which came back early. So yeah. That's wild. So did you ever have any inkling growing up that you might want to, maybe you didn't know the term counseling or therapist or anything like that, but help people through things?
Not at all. It really wasn't on my radar at all. I would say that my natural tendency when I was young was just pretty typical, just pretty selfish, self-centered kind of stuff, and I really don't have much of a recollection of being really empathetic towards others or really caring how my behavior affected other people and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't know. Maybe that isn't typical, but it was me. Um, I came to the Lord at age 16, and my life was transformed, and the way that I conducted myself was radically different. When I started my 10th grade year in high school, people were like, "David, you're different. What's changed about you?" And I was able to give my testimony at 16. Jesus changed my life around. I'm filled with the Holy Spirit, and so I don't talk the same. I don't act the same. I'm totally different. I was transformed. I was literally a new creation overnight, and it was amazing. And it ended up with some brand new friends and just kind of a whole new lease on life, and I think that was an early, of course, important transformation.
Where was that? Was that at church or was that?
I had grown up in a typical denomination. After my parents divorced, I started going to my grandparents' church, and so I was in the Sunday school, and I went to the camps, and we, stood up and sang a song, and then sat down and heard a sermon, and we were in and out in an hour, and so I think as a kid, I always believed in God and I believed the Bible, but it was never anything that I took seriously, and it certainly didn't impact my life in terms of like how I conducted it. But I believed. But age 16, some family friends invited us to a non-denominational, spirit-filled church, and I saw worship on a stage like I'd never seen before, with drums and keys and guitars, and I was like, wow, this is pretty awesome. And people were kneeling or raising their hands or prone, laying down on the carpet, and I heard things and saw things that I'd never even heard of before, and it just, something tugged on me. The Holy Spirit was like, this is real. This is real. And I gave my life to the Lord that Sunday, and I was baptized that afternoon in a community pool in an apartment complex across the street from the church. And that summer I was hanging out with the youth pastor, that was, he was the custodian of the church. So he was there Monday through Friday, and he was vacuuming and cleaning trash. So what do I do as a new believer? I go hang out with this, 20-something-year-old guy, and he really mentored me, and was just an amazing person in my life that first summer.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
So you transformed around 10th grade.
Yeah.
And then you started thinking about college after that and
Right.
what you wanted to do.
Yeah. More or less because I was told to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it was. You go to school or
Mhm.
you do a trade. So
Right.
it's not like that anymore much, but
Mm-hmm.
so once you were in college, how long did it take you when did you start thinking about counseling?
I didn't start thinking about it. That's what's so great about
That's
this
awesome.
story.
Yeah.
And when you first contacted me to share my story, and how I was called, really, and I know that's the name of your coffee
Yeah.
shop, and so that's really the theme of my story, is I was called. I had been in the broadcasting concentration as a major for about a year already. So I had had some classes under my belt, and I had a campus radio show that I was a DJ on. So I was spinning CDs. It was a jazz show. And I was getting involved with the campus television as a reporter and whatnot. So I was really into it. Like, I'm getting work experience as a college student, and I'm all excited and want to do well, right? So, if as best as I recall, it was about finals in the middle of the winter. So it was about the end of the fall semester. Probably would have been my second year of school. And I had a friend from church, a female friend, and we never dated. I wasn't even really that interested in her as dating material, simply because she's a little rough around the edges. She had had a history in high school and even younger of pretty hardcore drug use and some really difficult family life, just a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
Just a real sweet girl, but very broken, I would say. And so here it is in the midst of finals. This is important. I need to study. I need to prepare and do well for my finals. Somehow I ended up on a phone call with her, and I have vivid recollections of the phone call. And it was, along the lines of, "How are you doing?" And she said, "I don't really have any reason to live right now. I think I'm going to end it." And just something within me just like flipped. I was like, "You need to do something to help her and save her life. She sounds like she's at the end of her rope." And I said, "Hey, you just stay where you're at. I'm going to come and get you." Brought her back to our dorm room where I was studying. And we just talked for a couple hours, and honestly don't remember much of the conversation. I know that I listened to her. I know that I encouraged her. Um, but as we were leaving, and I was pulling the door shut to my dorm room to take her back home, she had this smile on her face, and her countenance was completely different, and like a gleam in her eye, like of joy. And I heard, and I'll call it the voice of God, and it was the calling.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I've only heard this once or twice in my life. "David, that's what you need to do with your life." And it was like immediately I remembered a few things, experiences that I had had where I was at a winter camp with a friend, and he had depression, and he was very despondent about things. And I remember being in the room, in the hotel room in Dallas, Texas with him, and he was pouring his heart out, and I was listening and I was encouraging. I hadn't remembered that, but it came back to me in that moment, and a couple other instances. And I was so compelled and convicted by that calling that I knew that I had to go into the registrar's office the following Monday and change my major to psychology. Without a doubt. I didn't even give it a second guess. Now, I still wanted to do broadcasting, and I wanted to do like Dr. Phil.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe it'll still happen.
Well, here you go.
But I knew that my life direction was going to change. So I knew that meant getting a bachelor's degree in psychology, and I took a minor in human development and family studies, and also knew that it was going to mean graduate school. And at the time, I aspired to get my doctorate. And as it turned out, that never happened, but I got my master's degree, and, life happened and things occurred. I went through a divorce at the age of 30, 28, 29. Had a 3-year-old son at the time, and, really shook my faith and really just kind of pulled me into a dark place for a while. But God has a way of bringing you back in. Same family that invited us to that church where I was saved invited us to another congregation. It was actually a Hebrew Roots congregation. And like God, the Holy Spirit just got a hold of me again and pointed me in a direction as far as
Years
ministry
later.
goes. Years later.
Same family.
Same family.
Wow.
Years later.
Awesome.
And at that point, I really started immersing myself in like the Shabbat and the feast days and learning Hebrew and the Judaic understanding of my faith. And I've been walking in that since. And that's the other part of my calling is, there's what I do professionally and to make money, but then there's what's my ministry and my calling. And it's really to introduce people to their Jewish Messiah and to understand the Jewish and Hebraic roots of our faith.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when you finish your master's program, do you go directly into practicing counseling?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. I wasn't licensed first. I was a pre-licensed therapist. I took a job, one of the hardest jobs I ever had. I was a residential counselor at a group home for boys who were convicted of criminal offenses.
Wow.
So in the Nashville area, these are like gang kids. Teenagers, yeah. Like we had like 13 to 19-year-olds. And they wanted to fight. They wanted to kick our butt all the time. They wanted to break the rules and not listen. It was a very hyper-aggressive environment, and I was there to provide therapy for these boys. And so, yeah, that was my first experience. I did that just as an employee. Moved back to Colorado for a few, intentionally to be near family. We had a baby, and I took a job similarly doing that. Had several jobs where I just, worked as a counselor, and then at some point along the way decided, I need to pursue my licensure, and I took the steps needed to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was all in Colorado?
Yeah, I'm licensed in Colorado as well.
Still practicing?
I do have a practice in Colorado.
And then here in near Alexandria?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So how do you, this is always a question to me because having a coffee shop in downtown Anniston, I deal with a lot of people going through stuff just off the streets, or when you're in a coffee shop working every day, and the simple "Hey, how are you today" can turn into a long conversation about things people are going through. We're usually the first ones to hear about a family member dying that weekend or stuff like that.
You're a caffeine bartender.
Yeah, absolutely. People come to us when they're not feeling for a pick me up.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times stuff weighs super heavy on me. And I haven't really figured out how to let it go yet, as my wife will tell you. And we've talked about this on the radio. This has been some stuff that I've talked with you about in therapy sessions. But how do you go about? I mean, because you hear all kind of things, and especially dealing with young people and teenagers that are going through stuff. How do you balance that and still be empathetic? I know a lot of people get cynical, and then it's easy to let your heart get hard when you're dealing with tragedy all the time, and like, I wish you would just do this and it'd fix it. But how do you deal with that when you go home and back to family, and you got a beautiful family, a lot of kids, wife and everything? So what's your transition like every day going from therapist to dad?
That's a great question. the answer is going to sound easy, and then I don't know if it's easier said than done or easier done than said. I'm not real sure, but I know I began the discipline early on of really compartmentalizing. And I know that word has some negative connotations because we don't want to necessarily be fragmented as a people and like we're this way in this environment and this way in this environment. I think it's important to be the same in all environments, in a sense, like you are who you are.
Yeah, for sure.
But in the sense that when I am in a counseling room with somebody, they are my only focus. They have to be my only focus. And it's a discipline to close the door on what's happening in the outside world. That might be family issues, that could be financial issues, that could be political or your church or whatever. I mean, there's issues that are happening, and as a professional, you can't allow what's going on in your personal life or in the environment or externally really influence too much your ability to be 100% present for that person in the room and to be able to listen, engage. And so there's the compartmentalization of what I do in professional counseling with a client is like a set apart time. And I try to do the best to block out what it is that may be going on in my personal life so that I can provide that. But then the reverse is true. When the door is open and it's time for me to go home, I can't take the demands, the pressures, the emotions necessarily of what I experienced in a counseling session with somebody and come home and lay that on my wife or my children, or carry that emotion too deeply into my personal life. I have to protect that as well. So I early on envisioned, I had actually had an old style coat rack in one of my office once, and I would visualize coming in the morning, turning on a light, opening the door, and putting my work clothes on, if you will, my mindset, my hat, if you will. And then at the end of the day, I would take that off, hang it up on that coat rack, and close the door, turn off the light, and leave it there. And so it was almost like a visualization of, what I do in the office is going to stay here. That doesn't mean that occasionally I can't, share with somebody, like, I had a really rough day. This is really interesting. That conversation occurred or whatever. Obviously confidentiality is maintained. But I have to keep what I do for a living and what I do as a professional ministry, we'll call it that, and not have it spill over into other areas of my life. I also think it's really important to be well balanced, to have hobbies and interests. I feel like I'm a relatively active person, and I like to hike and get on the lake and water ski and rock climb and do different things like that with the family. Down for road trips and seeing new things.
Yeah.
Pretty busy at home with the 4 kids at home, but always fixing something or repairing or painting, or the honey-do list, right, is pretty long. And it's about a balance, recreation and responsibilities with work and other things as well.
It reminds me of Mr. Rogers, where he comes in just the house, changes sweater to shoes.
Right.
He's different, good to go from being on the outside.
Yeah.
Have you always been good and been disciplined and able to make that transfer daily, or is that something you
So
learned?
it's nothing that I've really struggled with. I know some therapists probably have more of a, I don't want to necessarily say struggle, but it's like an ongoing diligence that they need to have to maintain the balance with work and home life. For whatever reason, it's just seemed to come kind of natural for me, which is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of a balance, that's what's led me, I think, into the few times that I've had what I would consider a almost complete mental breakdown the first time, and then the second time once I met you, I came and talked with you some. I was just going, uh, not your typical anxiousness as far as like, oh, I might get sick, or oh, this might happen, but just a fear of anxiousness, almost of being exhausted, being too tired, and just not stopping, not relaxing, not
Right.
and just the cycle of work, without love.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I find my fulfillment in life, is being a dad and a husband, obviously. But when I'm working, to me, that's the most important thing
Right.
I can be doing at that moment, and I will completely wrap myself up in it.
Yes. And in your position, I've come and visited you at the coffee shop, and you're there. You're not only available to the customers, but you're available to your staff. And in many ways, it is probably your ministry. And in many ways,
100%.
you're their shepherd in a lot of ways. And so it is a nonstop calling.
It is
when you're in that environment.
But I have let that overtake me at times and turn into just turn me into an emotional wreck.
Yeah.
And one thing you said to me that I think last time that I sought you out for some counseling, it was just external thoughts that were not practical.
Mm-hmm.
And you asked me, you said, so those thoughts, you said, do you feel like you're responsible for those thoughts that you're thinking?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was a turning point for me, honestly, because in my head, before that, I heard that question, I actually took the time to think about it. I was like, these are my thoughts, something's wrong. And you kind of explained to me all the external factors that we're subject to daily that even in history, people haven't been subject to as much as news like we are social media.
Right.
We're worried about things that are happening across the world that we have, really affect us. Not at all. Obviously we can pray for things like that, but I remember you asking me that, like, do you feel like you're responsible for all those thoughts you're thinking? And you helped me walk through that of no. But if I continue to dwell on those thoughts and let them become part of my thinking,
your narrative,
then I am responsible for it.
Yeah, you cultivate those thoughts.
Yeah.
I think I probably use the analogy of thoughts are like a stream, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Explain that if you don't mind.
There's junk in the water, right, that floats by, and it's just life, right? There's the good and there's the bad, and consciousness thoughts are like a stream. It's constantly changing, constantly. What you're thinking about now isn't what you were thinking 30 seconds ago. It's constantly changing. And so sometimes we have a tendency to identify these negative thoughts, or maybe they're recurring or thought habits, right? And it's like, oh, I'm going to pull that out of the water, and I'm going to really inspect it, and maybe I'm going to smell it, and maybe I'm going to rub it all over myself. And now the thought's all over me. And it's like, it's become more than just some junk that's floating down the river. And if you just maybe stay focused on what you need to stay focused on and identifying, that's a junky thought, right? That just let it float on by. You don't pick it up. You don't need to do anything with it. Don't interact with it.
Yeah. You helped me really learn that. I'm still learning it, of course, but
yeah, it's a discipline.
A lot better, and haven't had any breakdowns since any moments of crisis. What's really cool about that is I realized after that, learning that practice of just realizing I had that thought, trying to figure out if it's a thought from me or an external thought, and just not even worry about it.
Right.
But I do know when I'm overly exhausted or not eating right, my diet super affects me mentally.
Yep.
Like I love Cokes. I can't drink Cokes all the time. My wife won't let me, of course. But even like if I've drank Cokes for like, I did it recently. I started drinking a Coke with lunch because I'm just tired, and I just love Coke. Well, like a week later, I'm like, why am I so anxious?
Yeah.
And I drink coffee every day. It doesn't do.
Yeah.
But something about the sugar, I guess, the Coke, I don't know. But I was sitting there one night, and I was like, a small thing had happened, and it made me like super, like almost panicky. And I was like, wait a minute, I haven't had this feeling in a long time. Where is this coming from?
Right.
I was like, oh yeah, I've been drinking Coke, and that kind of distorted my ability to filter those thoughts.
I work with people on lifestyle and how their diet and exercise affects their mental health, and research is abundant that the link between gut health and mental health is indisputable. We live in a culture where people don't have enough time, and so a lot of meals are out of bags or out of frozen section of the grocery store, or highly processed, or cellophane packaging, and a lot of that food is void of nutrients and vitamins and minerals, and all your brain has to make the fundamentals of neurotransmitters is what we get out of our food. So it's important that we're eating fresh and eating foods that are rich in vitamins and minerals, and so that our brains can make the neurotransmitters we need to feel right and normal. And so I think that maybe it's an epidemic. I really see with a lot of the people that I work with, they come to me with depression, they come with anxiety, they come with a variety of issues, and I need to talk to them about what they're eating and whether they're exercising or not. It's really
just for me, just going outside for a day with my kids makes me makes a world of difference in my mental state. What are you seeing anything now that you didn't see in the past so much as far as like a reoccurring problem that people are dealing with, and they're seeking you out for therapy for certain things that is more prevalent now than you feel like it was when you started, maybe?
I think that there's some big influence because of devices and screen time and social media and things. I think being in the field as long as I have and observing kids and adults' behaviors, I really think that there's a lot to be said about the culture of the inability to have an attention span or to have creativity. It's easy to fall into a screen habit, whether it's on the TV in the corner of the room or in your hand going like this, where you're constantly getting, a new image, new message, new sound. And I think it's robbing people, not just young people, but I think it's all generations of the ability to sustain a concentration, or their ability to be creative with their time. And so there's this need to like passively consume and be neuro stimulated in a way that's only devices can bring, unfortunately. And so people are going outside. They're not taking their shoes off and getting them in the sand or in the grass. They're not experiencing things. They're sedentary, so they're not exercising as much. And I think I'm seeing a lot of what we would typically diagnose as ADD or ADHD symptoms in youth, but I've got a lot of adults that are coming to me and they're like, I'm not motivated. I can't get anything started. I can't get anything done. And I think it's really a symptom of how digitally dependent we are and our brains have become. And so I think that would probably be the biggest change in the last 20 something, 30 years.
It's such an easy trap of,
Oh yeah.
I had a rough day, so I know my kids are in there playing. I'm just gonna sit like right and scroll because it does make you feel better.
Yeah.
I don't know chemically why it does it, but
What you don't realize is could you do instead that would make you feel even better?
even better. And then once you've seen all the new stuff for the day, you just continue to scroll through April stuff. Dooms. Hey, then you get like all it. Then you get depressed because you're like, oh, this is just the same old stuff.
Right.
Yeah, doom scrolling. I had that conversation with my daughter the other day. She was bored, and I was like, well, go play, use your imagination. She's like, I can't think of anything right now. And I said, do you think your technology, she doesn't get it much, but do you think playing the games or watching, she likes to watch YouTube Kids, of course.
Right.
You think doing that is stopping you from being creative? And she sat there for a minute. She's 9. So she sat there and she was like, maybe. She's like, because when I've been playing, I've been watching people play and playing at the same time. And so she's actually playing along with YouTube Kids instead of playing by herself, which to me was, I didn't know. But
She's got a fair amount of insight at 9 to recognize that.
yeah.
And a lot of people just defend it like, no, of course not.
Well, that's what she did at first. But after a few minutes of talking through it and explaining, that happens to me too. Yeah, and I'll get so distracted easily by, especially at work, trying to get something done. It's a busy, loud coffee shop. And then my phone will beep and I'll look to see who texts me. Next thing, 20 minutes later, I'm on Facebook Marketplace looking. It's like,
Yeah.
I just like, what just happened to those 20 minutes? It's just a habit. Do you think a lot of and I know a lot of the problems you see are chemical imbalance stuff that's people, obviously there's a lot of stuff people need medicine to help with, at least temporary, if not forever. How much do you think, especially depression and stuff, or even anxiety, is related to people just losing purpose or losing meaning or calling in life? I know for me that's been huge. Anytime that I felt like I was in a spot that wasn't where I was supposed to be, all of a sudden
That's a great question.
Emotionally gone.
Yeah. I would say that there's a huge connection between the two. I don't know that you can necessarily say what percentage of the time one causes the other. So there's correlation, but not necessarily causation. So is it that a lack of direction and a lack of purpose in your life creates a depression, and then, or is it that there's something that's going on, maybe neurochemically, or maybe a spiritual battle that's going on, circumstantial, where depression starts to set in, and then one loses their ability to feel a purpose. So yeah, they're definitely very closely related and wrapped up. And that's one of the things we do in therapy is take a look at every aspect of a person's life, because we are created beings with a very integrated mind, soul, body, and spirit, and everything is so connected. And I liken being in good mental health to being like spokes on a wheel, if you will. If the spokes are not adjusted well, and some are too tight and some are too loose, you're going to have a wheel that's wobbling like this, and it's not going to be a smooth ride, right? And you have to go and adjust each spoke and align that wheel. And I think our lives are much the same way. You might have a lot of great things in your life aligned in the right place, and you can have one or two spokes that are out of whack, and your ride isn't going to be smooth. And so I like to look at, you know, mental health as an integration of okay, on a different levels, like you're talking about your thinking, the stream of consciousness and thoughts, the way we think about our circumstances or about the environment or what's happening to us, the way we interpret it affects how we feel, and our emotions will follow, and then that'll affect how we do. It's the think, feel, do cycle, if you will. And then what we do then turns around and influences our environment. And so we're back in the loop. What do we think about what we did, or what do others think about what we did or said? And so you get stuck into patterns or habits, if you will, of thinking. And sometimes therapy is being able to help people recognize those errors in their thinking, or their unhealthy or unreasonable or unrealistic ways of thinking. Um, as a believer, it's important to be able to reconcile what the word says with what I do in psychology. And scripture says to take every thought captive, obedience to the Messiah. And so for a lot of my clients who are believers, I could say, look, what we're working on and taking your thoughts captive to the Messiah is, are your thoughts aligning with what you know to be true, fundamentally true, and aligning with the word of God? So if you have a thought that you're no good and you're worthless, well, the word says something different. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. You have a purpose and a calling, and God loves you. That's the truth. And so helping people to recognize those thought patterns while they're in them. How many times have you said something or done something like, oh man, what was I thinking?
Daily.
And right, me too. Just because I'm a therapist, I'm not immune from all this myself. But I try to get people to have an awareness, so where they're in a situation, they go, man, what am I thinking? And catch it. And so they need to recognize that error in thinking, that it's incorrect or misaligned. They need to reject it and say, no, I'm not going to cultivate that thought. I'm not going to pull it out of the water, as it were. I'm not going to develop it. And then they replace it. Replace that thought with something that you know is true, something that's reasonable, right, or aligned with a truth. And so that discipline, it has a lot to do with that balance of physical, mental, emotional well-being. Tools and skills to help people deal with anxiety. It's a fairly common human experience. Things happen.
It's natural. We're supposed
It
to.
is a natural response. Same with anger, same with sadness. I mean, we are emotional beings. And so we have these elements of emotional experience. And when it gets to the place of being unhealthy, it's because you're usually locked into a coping mechanism or a defense mechanism that's worked, but it may keep you stuck. So a defense mechanism for anxiety might be avoidance. Well, if I can just avoid situations and people and things that make me anxious, then I've solved the problem. No, you've learned that by avoiding conversations with people or situations, you're not going to have that anxiety, but now you've learned to be avoidant. And so now you're maybe don't have a healthy social life. Maybe you have some loneliness. Maybe you don't have accountability in your life. There's a whole lot of pitfalls of that as a defense mechanism, just as an example. I already talked about diet and exercise. That's really important. Having a healthy social life and balanced family and friends, a spiritual life, a spiritual community, recreational life. It's important to be well balanced and have those spokes really adjusted well so that that tire is true. And so really what I do in therapy is try to hit on all of those and not just one.
Yeah.
And medication may be a part for
Yeah.
some people. You asked that in the question. Some people can benefit from medication if there's a neurochemical imbalance of some sort, if not enough of something is being made or it's being absorbed too quickly back into the bloodstream. There's medications that can help. Personally and professional, I believe that in most instances, medication can be used as a catalyst with therapy to make changes in your coping strategies and using tools and skills to become more effective in your environment and to break the habits and patterns that are not healthy. And medication can help you do that. And then maybe in most cases, you've learned to become successful and learn to navigate away from the pitfalls that you typically would have fell into. And then your confidence is increased and your reward for doing things in a healthy, right way increase, and it gets easier. And there is likely less of a need for medication when you've begun mastering some of those other things.
What would you say like a healthy practice of a thought pattern to get out? Say I'm driving home. This has happened to me before in Peru on the side of a mountain. But say I'm driving home, all of a sudden I'm in a fog storm and I'm like, I'm not gonna make it. This is certain death. And all of a sudden my thoughts start to spiral. Like walk me through what a healthy way to realize those thoughts are not practical or to come out of.
Sure. I think for some people, there's a tendency for the automatic thought to go to what I call what if. What if I get rear-ended? What if I drive off the edge of the mountain? What if, and so fill in the blank with worst case scenario. And so it's really, I think, rooted in fear. I think the base emotion there is fear. And so then the conscious mind comes in behind that and says, what is there to fear? Death, something that's out of my control. The fog, I can't see. What am I going to do? And then like this worst case scenario is imagined. I don't know where it is in scripture, but I know that there's a reference in scripture to vain imaginations and that is not of God. And so the way I interpret that is that when we, in our mind, paint this worst case scenario picture of all the horrible, awful things that are going to happen when they haven't happened yet, it's a vain imagination. Really, your mind is imagining the worst case scenario, and there's no evidence to support that that's what's going to happen. So in an instance like yours, and I get that question a lot from people who tend to catastrophize with their thoughts, is to go ahead and play the what if game, but flip the script. What if you get through the fog just fine? What if you just slow down and take your time and the fog lifts? What if you go home that night and live the rest of your life? What if? And so it's almost by playing the game with a more reasonable response instead of going to that nth degree worst case scenario, catastrophic. And it's what if everything is okay? What if everything works out all right? And so just taking a moment and recognizing that it's not always worst case scenario. It usually isn't. I think another big part of that one is, and I may have worked with this with you when we were working together, is in situations it's important to be able to recognize what's in your control and out of your control.
Yeah, that was for sure one of my main problems.
Yeah. And so when you're driving in a steep mountainside in a fog, there's really not much you're controlling the vehicle, and maybe it is smart to just come to a stop until the fog lifts. I mean, you have to make that decision. But worrying about the fog and worrying about your health and your safety isn't going to lift the fog, and it isn't going to make you any safer. I have clients that worry about taking their children in the car to go to a doctor's appointment because they're afraid they're going to get into a car accident and their child is going to die. And so it's being paralyzed in fear with something that's out of your control. And so part of recognizing that is there are things that are within your control and things that are out of your control. And particularly with anxiety and fear and anger. You know, I know some people have road rage. That was something that I probably used to have when I was younger. Maybe I sometimes still have to deal with it a little bit. But recognizing that something is out of my control, you know, if there's road paving on a road and the lane is shut down and I'm 15, 20 minutes late, I'm gonna get anxious because I have somewhere to be, I have someone waiting for me. I'm gonna get really anxious. But then I have to stop and think, this is out of my control. Worrying about it, getting upset about it, fretting about it, getting angry about it isn't gonna get me there on time. It's just gonna make me miserable while I wait. Yeah. And so part of that mental discipline is learning to assess what's in your control and out of your control and what a reasonable response should be based on that. Coupled with, is it important or not? A lot of people spend a lot of emotional energy on things that aren't important either, you know, like whether their sports team wins or loses, or
watching the news too much.
The news, yeah, is a culprit.
So
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask you this for my own personal gain, but what's it like guiding teenagers through the process of being a teenager, realizing, figuring out life, the ebbs and flows of life and the emotions that come with being a teenager, and then heading into college that you're dealing with now? Like how's that experience for a therapist?
Well, I think I'll have to answer that more from a dad perspective than a therapist perspective. Obviously, I work with teens, and some of them are real engaged in therapy, and I've worked with some for several years, and they really, really appreciate it, and others are there because their parents drag them, and they don't want to say much. But as a dad and having raised 5 kids, my youngest is 13, and my oldest is like 30 years old this summer. But we have 20-year-olds and a teenage daughter as well. So I think for our family, what's really worked is just open dialogue. I want my children to be able to come to my wife and me to talk about anything and everything. I don't want them to feel like mom and dad aren't approachable to talk about any subject. And so we've been real frank with our kids and involved them in conversations that some might say might be edgy or inappropriate. You know, we live in the South, and we live in a real religious area, and there's some topics that I think parents are uncomfortable talking about with their kids, and maybe they just avoid it altogether, or they trust that their kids will get their information from school or maybe a youth pastor, and it's not even addressed. And so we've had some challenging, difficult conversations with our kids at an early age appropriate, of course, about things, but like, this is the reality of the world we live in, and these are the pitfalls, and these are the snares, and you need to be on the lookout and watch out for this and make good decisions. Realizing that your children aren't perfect and they're going to make mistakes, but they need to be able to feel safe enough to be able to come to you and say, I've messed up, I made a mistake. And we've had definitely some doozies in our family with some of the kids. So it's really coming from a place of preparing them to be young adults. Oh, that's a big one. Like, we could spend a whole podcast on this topic, but I hear parents say, I just want to let my kids be kids. I just want to be kids. And my response to that is, okay, but is your job to train them to be kids, or are you training them to be adults? Are you training them to be husbands and wives and mothers and fathers and responsible, to have integrity and to be able to manage their household and make good decisions? Or are you teaching them that they can just get whatever they want when they ask for it, or misbehave and just have fun all the time and have no responsibilities? Like, what are we teaching them? And so I think from a parenting perspective, it's important that parents are raising the bar for their children, because ultimately we're raising young adults. Mm. And when they're 13, 14 years old, you just have a small window before it's gone, and they may be out on their own. And so you can't take for granted a weekend that you have with your kid, because you do the math, you probably have a few dozen weekends of influence in your young person's life. And so it's precious. So being available, being willing to talk about the difficult things with your kids, and making them feel safe, and not feeling that knowing they're safe and talking about anything life may come throw their way, right?
Yeah. I'm not so much worried about my son being a teenager I am worried about, not worried, but I do think a lot about my daughter being a teenager.
Yeah.
Not because I don't think she can handle it. She's going to be a great teenager.
Yeah.
I know, but as you know, father and daughter relationships it's something special.
Yeah.
And I know you spend a great amount of time cultivating that relationship with your daughter. I've seen it. Do you have any tips for that as far as cultivating a relationship, father and daughter,
Wow.
in a healthy way?
Yeah.
To see her flourish.
Yeah. I think a daughter needs to not just see, but experience what it means to be respected and loved and cared for and protected by her dad, because that's what she's going to translate into what she thinks she needs from a husband. And so that's no small task for us as fathers, that the kind of interactions that she sees that I have with her mother and that I have with her are more or less going to frame what she's going to expect from a spouse in the future. And I'm not going to say I'm perfect. I've worked really hard though, and I have, have a lot of people that I'm friends with. I think have done fantastic jobs with their daughters as well. And again, it's linked so much to the culture, right? We live in a culture that's so busy, and some men have to work 50, 60 hours a week, so they're not with their families as much, or you have dual income families, so you got children that don't have a whole lot of parental interactions in that way. Fast food, dinner in a sack in the back seat of a car on the way to this, and no real slow time or dinner time. We have made it a point in our family to have dinner around the table most meals. Just made that a family culture. We've tried to establish, Friday night Shabbat dinner is a sacred time, and we'll often sit down and have the nicest meal of the week with our family. And sometimes we have guests come and invite people over for that experience. But the interactions of a father with his daughters are going to set the tone for what she's going to expect. If you're harsh with your words or cutting or sarcastic, then that's what she's going to expect from a man. And so I think there's this firm gentleness that needs to take place, and it's a delicate balance. And not all daughters are the same either. So you could be the most invested, kind, patient, concerned, loving father, and still have a challenge on your hands because for whatever reason she got those genes, right?
Yeah. My daughter got a lot of her genes from me, obviously, and she's very headstrong. 90% of the time it's in a good way.
Yeah.
But, there's that 10% where it's a battle that I can't let her win, and trying to figure out how to not crush her spirit during that time, and no, it's not okay. You talk back to us and
Right.
and you're not, we said no, so you're not doing it, without, trying to be too much of a, trying to steer her to make those good decisions instead of breaking,
Right.
I don't want to feel like I'm breaking her or anything like that. But I know that being headstrong is a good quality when it's used for good, and she needs to have that as she grows up. So that's what I'm learning, is how to cultivate that.
Well, I have 4 sons and 1 daughter, and my daughter's 16, so I can't say that I'm necessarily an expert on raising, but my daughter is definitely doing very well and loves the Lord, and I'm very proud of her.
Yeah, that's great. Do you have any, when people come into your office, is there a certain type of thing people are going through that you enjoy the most? Is there one thing that,
I don't know. I find it all interesting and challenging. Each person's narrative is unique to them, and so you have common diagnoses or common experiences, but every person's journey is unique. And one of my favorite things to do is at a very first appointment is to just sit down with somebody I've never met before and say, "Tell me your story." And it's 2 parts. It's what are you going through now that brings you into counseling now? So what are your symptoms? How is your life being affected? What's going on? But then the other half of that is, how did you arrive where you are today? Tell me your backstory, and it's, tell me about how you were raised and what you experienced. What were some of the things that affected you in your formative years? Traumas or relationship and family issues or economic issues or academic or anything. Lots of factors that play in, and so I find that fascinating. And I think that's my favorite is getting to know somebody. My wife jokes that I've never met a stranger. I'll be in the grocery store or I'll be wherever, and she's like, "Oh, there's David. He's making friends. He's gonna get invited over to somebody's house or whatever." I just enjoy talking to people, and I guess that's the gift that God imparted to me when He called me, because that was not my natural state, as a young man.
Yeah. Does it ever feel burdensome?
No.
Sometimes no.
Mm-mm.
Wow, that's awesome. That's great. What would you say to someone that's, I guess, a young person, and maybe not young, people swap careers, at every stage of life, but what would you say to someone who's thinking about going into counseling or therapy, or I think they might have a calling, even if it's not professionally? I would say I counsel some people. Usually I end up sending them to you. I know I've sent a lot of people to you. You can't confirm that, of course, but they have told me they do come to you. um, uh, what would you say to somebody that just enjoys or talking to people like that and counseling people through things?
Sure. Um, in light of the topic of our conversation, if they feel more or less called to something like that, then how can you go against that? It's almost like you have to. It's this compulsion to, like, in some shape, form, or fashion, fulfill that calling, whether it's going to school and getting professional training, or it's becoming a ministerial counselor, or getting involved in a ministry or something like that, or even in the community and volunteering with a disadvantaged community, people who are in recovery, or people who are in poverty, or other disadvantaged. There's a lot of ways to get plugged in and help people, for sure. And I would say that your question applies to anything. If anyone feels called to something, then why would you resist that? It's like, okay, something bigger than me, outside of me, is drawing me to this. And so I think you just look for open doors and opportunities to walk through.
Yeah. Okay. What's a good limit? Like, let's see. This is a hard question to phrase the right way. I do get to help people walk through things a lot, whether it's a quick conversation or friends that we talk, for months on end about things they're going through or I'm going through. What's a good uh, sign that I need to recommend them to get professional help, more so than just even I've seen ministry counseling go south quick because they needed some professional trained help. So
Sure.
what's a good signs or a good border I don't want to cross
Okay.
with counseling people?
That's a really great question, and I don't know that there's necessarily a hard and steadfast rule, black and white kind of answer. I think it really depends on a case by case basis. Somebody is yourself that is an entrepreneur, and somebody who's been in ministry. I think you get that sense. I think when you're trading into murky waters. You kind of get that feeling of, like, maybe this is something where I need to not provide anything more, and make a referral to somebody who's professionally trained. And part of that is going to be like liability issues, for one. If you're dealing with a major concern, like a lethality or suicidality kind of thing, I'm not saying that friendly counseling or pastoral counseling or counseling across the coffee shop isn't helpful and beneficial. People need that, by all means. But if somebody would have hurt themselves and didn't get the professional help that they could have gotten, um, then that becomes a concern. If you're talking to somebody and you're learning that they've got, like, very severe symptoms of depression or anxiety or anger, um, very, very low self-esteem, or um, very deeply ingrained personality traits, narcissism or dependence, or like a bipolar mood swingy kind of thing, or borderline traits, any of those things where it gets to be significant impairment in the person's life, or even a co-occurring substance abuse with that as well, is where the waters start to get murky, and you probably want to pass it along to somebody who can really take a professional tact with that. Not that you would need to disconnect with that person, maintain that marketplace ministry, that ministry at church, and that friendship, if it's just a friendship. But when it gets to the point where it's severely interfering with the person's life or quality of life, and professional help is probably a good add-on.
Well, that's great. Yeah. What I've done for the past couple of years is I've been able to, mainly with the men, I've talked to a lot of men that are going through stuff and they don't realize how, like, man, I'm just like freaking out. I'm so anxious all the time. I'm like, I've been there. And as soon as you let them know it's somewhat normal. A lot of people go through this. It's not just you. It's going to be okay. I'll do that first of all, and then I'll tell them my story. And really that's all I have. Then I'll just listen. I don't have any advice to give other than that. This is what I've been through.
There is a pretty big misconception of counselors and therapists that we tell people what to do or necessarily give advice. And there is an element to that. But really where the true beauty is a counselor or a therapist is really most effective at helping the person find their own solutions and to explore options and to pick something that works. So rather than me telling what you need to do, I help you discover what you feel like you need to do differently. And then you internalize that because it's from you. It's not because some outside entity told you should do it. And it's more likely to be internalized and have long-lasting effects.
Yeah. And it also helps you build that thought process of maybe I can't figure some stuff out on my own instead of relying on someone else. So this is a little bit of a fun question. I ask everybody this. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you feel like you are in what you're called to do? Where do you feel like you're living right now in your calling and why?
Like optimum,
like you're 100% doing what you're supposed to be doing. 0 is I'm not even close and probably going the wrong way.
It's as far as professionally goes with the counseling, I would say right now I'm at 100%. Like I love what I'm doing. My private practice is flourishing. I love the people that I work with and the environment that I'm in, and it's really, really wonderful. So that's completely fulfilling. On the ministry side, and I shared with you a few minutes ago about introducing Christians to the Hebrew roots of the faith and a Judaic understanding and reference point and practice. I would say that's where I feel like the percentage is a lot lower, and it's circumstantial, but it's maybe things haven't come to fruition circumstantially or the right connections or the right venue or whatever. But just waiting and hoping and praying that whatever the Lord, whatever God wants to call me and us into, that would come into place. But there is a bit of a feeling of not being where we need to be.
Yeah, I can share that.
To quantify it, I don't know, 30%. Yeah. It could be a lot higher.
I feel the same way. I like we're business wise doing what we're supposed to be doing. I think we're, which I'm probably a little too optimistically blindly following whatever I feel like the Lord has been. It's a wild ride. But also I want to be traveling more. I want to be doing some more stuff internationally. Like this is what got us here in the first place, but it's just financially not there and timing is not there. And so I'm just, I know it's going to come, but I understand that for sure.
And a big part of that for me is also my better half. My wife, Nicole, just finished her midwifery degree and a licensure. And so she's starting to take on clients and being able to really, I'm not going to give away her age, but at the age that she is, being able to finally walk in her calling, which she received when she was probably 19, 20 years old.
Yeah. Yeah, my wife's and we were talking in a meeting the other day about, we went around and said what our dreams are. And most people had dreams, and my wife was like, I don't know. And it's like, you're living your dream. This is all you talked about right now since we met each other, was being a mom and raising these kids.
Right.
And she puts 100% of herself into being a mom and wife. And she's great at it, and she's homeschooling as well. So she's being teacher as well. But I'm watching her live out her dream, but when she stopped and thought about it, she's like, I don't really know if I have any dream.
But that's a valid dream.
You're right in the middle, though. Yeah, you're 100% where you're.
If that's a calling, for a season that you walk in, and my wife Nicole did the same thing. She had to put that midwifery dream on hold for many, many years to raise children. We homeschooled and we did a lot to bring them up, and they get to the age where it's like, all right, now's the time, and everything just kind of aligned to happen. So. that percentage is, as far as operating in your calling, she's now building and growing as she steps into hers. And so, there's that dynamic as well.
Yeah. And I've seen my calling shift over the years from, I played drums and that was what I was supposed to do. I still do that some, but that was my life at the time, to working in a factory and giving that 100%, running a business and giving that 100%, doing missions work. That was my calling at the time.
Yeah.
I knew it 100%, and I know 100% I'm doing now. They all feed into each other. I learned so much in the past. So it's been a wild ride, but to see people such as her that have sacrificed so much to be a wife and kids and then move into, I'm sure she had a whole bunch of fulfillment during that time as well, but then to move into another career, that's kind of, kids are growing up and they're self-sufficient, and that's really cool to see. I'm excited for her. So.
We are too.
And age does not matter. I mean, she could have done that when she was, waited until she was 70 and then moved into that. But still successfully been a midwife, which is awesome. So, well, thank you so much. How can people seek out your services in Colorado or here, or?
Well, I would be surprised if someone saw this podcast in Colorado and reached out to me, but
You'd be surprised. Yeah.
my company in Colorado is Colorado Assessment and Treatment Center, and we're in the Denver, Fort Collins, Greeley, Loveland area, and we just do outpatient mental health and substance abuse. But my practice here is Freedom Counseling Services out of Alexandria, and you can find me by Googling Freedom Counseling or my name, David Yingling Counselor. You can email me or phone me, and that's the way to get a hold of me.
Awesome. And you have a couple dogs that come with you sometimes?
I do. I've got 2 golden doodles. They're siblings, and one or the other comes with me, and they're really great addition to the office. People love to sit with them and pet them while they're talking to me. And sometimes the dogs end up on the couch next to people, and they're a real great read as to what the person is going through and what they might need emotionally. And so they're neat to have along.
Do you see them change? Can you tell by watching them when someone moves into, say I'm walking through a traumatic thing and I start feeling those feelings of anxiousness that happened years ago? Do they act different?
Sometimes when there's a display of emotion, the dog may be laying next to me and will actually get up and walk over to the person and put their head in their lap. It's amazing. And I've had clients say, these dogs know, don't they?
Wow.
And I have to say, yeah, I think they do.
That's really cool. That does make me want to get a dog, even though I'm trying to avoid it at all costs. That's great. Well, thank you so much. It was really hard for me not to turn this into a therapy session for myself.
Oh, it's good. Thank you for having me in. It's really great to chat with you.
Sure, we'll do another one sometime. I'd love to hear that and some stuff. But thank you so much.
You're welcome.